Good evening, wanderer of stories. Tonight, we drift behind the iron-banded oak doors of a medieval castle, where dawn has not yet touched the outer walls, but the kitchens below already seethe with life, or at least a particularly pungent version of it. You'll begin your day hunched beside a cauldron the size of a bathtub, battling rats for the privilege of using your own ladle. Welcome to the worst job in the keep. You're the castle cook now. And no, you probably won't survive this. Find a comfortable spot, allow your shoulders to soften, and let the steady rhythm of your breath guide you towards stillness. While you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my work. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what hour glows on your clock. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in darkness, not the gentle blue-black of pre-dawn serenity, but the greasy, oppressive dark of a kitchen hearth that never dies. Smoke clings to the beams overhead and to your lungs as you cough awake in your shared straw nest, though calling it yours is a bit generous. You're nestled in with 3 scullions and a piglet that wandered in 2 weeks ago and was never asked to leave. Your nose registers the kitchen before your eyes do, a stew of odours so layered it feels spiritual. There's the musty tang of damp wood, the sour bloom of last night's eel pie still curdling in the corner, and the immortal funk of Geoffrey, the butcher's apprentice, who insists he is part wolf, and thus exempt from washing. It's not even morning yet. You rise because the bell will ring soon, and if you're not on your feet before it does, head cook Morwenna will find new ways to make you wish you'd been born a beetle. She once threw boiling stock at a page boy who called her "Milady." His scream haunts the pantry still. Your first task is, of course, to revive the fire that never actually died. The castle kitchen's central hearth is an open beast, ringed with blackened pots and panicked pigeons nesting in the rafters. You prod the embers with a metal rod that could double as a mace, feeding it with kindling that you had the foresight to steal from the carpenter's shed last night. Good thing too, wood is precious. Some kitchens burned dried dung. Yours is not that bad. Yet, the ceiling is low, the soot is thick, and the air is so smoky you feel like a brisket. Ventilation is a luxury reserved for towers and chapels, not the subterranean hellhole where food is made. You've heard rumours of chimneys in far-off cities like Florence, but here we simply let the smoke out the door and pretend it works. Historians still argue whether castle kitchens were placed underground for warmth, secrecy, or sheer spite. The rats greet you like colleagues. They skitter along the walls, bold as bishops, snatching up crumbs and daring you to chase them. You don't. You're saving your strength for lugging barrels of pickled cabbage and heaving ox femurs into cauldrons. Besides, these rats are enormous. One of them wears what you swear is a stolen baby's mitten. Eventually, Morwenna lumbers in. She's 6 feet of chainmail apron and moral decay, wielding a cleaver like a bishop wields a crozier. She says nothing. She just glares until a pot starts boiling out of sheer fear. Your co-workers shuffle in behind her. The soup stirrer who may or may not be asleep standing up, the pastry lad with burn scars shaped like pastry, and Bertram, the spitter. His job is literally to turn the meat on the spit, that's all. Just one roast, all day. He's also missing 2 fingers, and most of his dignity. You begin prep for the morning meal. Don't say breakfast. That's too modern. Most people in the castle won't eat until mid-morning, but the Lord demands his eye-openers by the time the rooster's crow has stopped echoing. You grind stale bread into what barely passes as porridge, mix ale with watered wine to wash it down, and sear slabs of salt pork that smell like regret and crunch like despair. You do not eat. You nibble, if you're lucky. Crumbs from a trencher, tossed aside by a noble too drunk to notice it fell into the rushes. The closest you get to a real meal is licking the gravy off your own fingers when no one's looking. As you work, the kitchen comes alive with strange music. The hiss of fat dripping into flame, the slap of dough, the muttered prayers to St. Lawrence, patron of cooks. Ironic, considering he was roasted alive. Someone drops a pot, and Morwenna growls a curse in Latin so foul even the rats recoil. There's no clock, of course. Time is measured in pain. How long your back aches before you have to fetch water from the well. How far the sun's risen when the fire burns low again. How many chickens must be plucked before you can pause to wipe your brow with the edge of your sleeve? By the time the sun actually rises, slanting a sickly beam through the cracked wooden shutters, you've already been awake for hours. Your arms throb, your lungs sting, and your stomach performs interpretive dance routines of protest. You're halfway to delirious and fully soaked in a combination of grease, sweat, and what might be pigeon droppings. And it's not even feast day. This is just a Tuesday. A mainstream historical fact for you. Most large medieval castles had at least 2 kitchens, one for the great hall and another for the private rooms of the lord. You, lucky you, work in the lower kitchen. That's where the filth collects and the gossip festers. And it's also where the servants relieve themselves, since walking all the way to the garderobe is too risky when Morwenna's on the prowl. You pause for a moment, staring into the fire. It stares back. Somewhere above, music from the chapel begins, a monk chanting his way into breakfast. You've just finished scraping mould from the last onion. Still think chef sounds romantic. You'd think, perhaps naively, that after such a blistering dawn shift, you'd be given some reprieve, a crust of bread, a cup of ale, maybe even a moment to sigh without inhaling ash. But no, the morning meal is but a warm-up act. The real ordeal is the feast to come. You're deep in feeding the feast, which is less cooking and more sprinting through chaos while occasionally catching fire. The midday banquet looms, and the lord of the castle has returned from whatever pointless skirmish he was pretending to win, which means tonight will be a grand celebration. Grand, of course, for the guests. For you, it means one thing: culinary warfare. The kitchen erupts into movement with all the grace of a goose stampede. Pigs squeal as they're dragged by their hooves across the greasy stones. Geese honk mournfully from burlap sacks, and somewhere a child is weeping over a fallen pie. You'd comfort him, but you're elbow deep in fish guts, and someone just shouted that the venison has gone missing. Let's clarify. Cooking for a noble's feast isn't a gentle ballet of flavours and flutes. It's an endurance test where your tools include a splintered ladle, 3 knives of questionable sharpness, and an old pot that doubles as a helmet in times of stress. One of your tasks today is roasting an entire ox on a spit the length of a cart. A task made more difficult by the fact that your kitchen's idea of rotation technology is Bertram the Spit Boy, tied to a wheel with a stick in his mouth so he doesn't scream again. And the smell. Saints above, the smell. Sweet meats rubbed in honey and herbs, hissing over flames. Spiced apples slowly liquefying in pewter pots. Boiled barley groaning from the cauldron. And behind it all, the lurking stench of burning feathers, forgotten fish, and someone's wool tunic that got too close to the hearth. There's no such thing as flavour balance. Medieval cuisine is less concerned with taste and more obsessed with showing off how many spices you can cram into a single pheasant. Pepper, cloves, ginger, saffron, exotic luxuries that cost more than your life is currently worth. You crush them with a mortar while dodging splashes of lard and shouts of panic. You are instructed, firmly, not to taste the food. That's not your role. You're the vessel, not the diner. Even if you wanted to sneak a bite, good luck. Everything's either raw or cooked into unrecognizable mush. One dish involves stuffing a goose inside a pig inside a deer, and then sewing the deer closed with twine made from a nun's old habit. The result smells like apocalypse but looks very impressive when set aflame and paraded into the hall. Historians still argue whether these absurd meat sculptures, porcupine pies, swan pastries, roasted peacocks with their feathers reattached, were ever eaten or just meant to awe the guests. You lean toward the latter. You've seen a knight flick an entire roast chicken off the table because its glaze wasn't shiny enough. Meanwhile, coordination is non-existent. The scullions boil cabbages no one asked for. Someone pours salt into the honey. The kitchen boy in charge of fruit keeps eating the fruit. And Morwenna? She's whacking a rack of lamb with the flat of her cleaver while muttering about the Crusades. You do not ask questions. You simply keep stirring, kneading, flipping, sweating. And the heat is unholy. Standing near the hearth is like being hugged by a very angry bear made of fire. Your apron is soaked, your shirt clings like wet parchment, and your face has achieved a glow that would make a beetroot jealous. The only breeze comes from the bellows, operated by a boy who might also be asleep, judging by how many times the fire's gone out. At one point, you're sent to fetch more eels. You descend into the damp, briny dungeon that is the storage cellar, where barrels of pickled things, cabbage, fish, what may once have been plums, gurgle ominously. You fish out a basket of eels, one of which is somehow still alive. It slaps you in the face and escapes under a bench. You let it go. You respect its spirit. Back upstairs, a brawl breaks out. Not an unusual event. The butcher and the baker disagree on poultry carving technique and have begun flinging giblets. A duck carcass arcs majestically through the air and lands in the pot you were just about to clean. You stir it in. Waste not. And then comes the dreaded call from the steward. Hall preparation. The kitchen convulses. Trays are stacked, dishes covered in linen, and you, sweaty, bruised, smelling like a collapsed tavern, are ordered to carry the spiced boar's head to the main hall. The hallway is worse than the kitchen. You're followed by a procession of cooks, scullions, and one incredibly enthusiastic trumpeter. The Lord expects pageantry. You are part of the theatre now, balancing a flaming centerpiece on a greasy board while a lute player sings a song about how divine the meat shall be. You would laugh, but your arms are numb. The feast begins. You do not eat. You watch from behind a curtain, ready to dash back for forgotten sauces or retrieve knives flung by noblemen in fits of drunken joy. One knight demands more salt. Another throws his trencher at a minstrel. A third asks if the soup was made with the tears of virgins, then winks at a nun. You wait, quiet and invisible, until the scraps are collected. Then you return to the kitchen to start again, cleaning, restocking, preparing tomorrow's meal before today is even over. And yes, that's your reward, the leftovers. If the dogs haven't gotten to them first. For your mainstream historical fact, great feasts in medieval castles could consist of up to 5 courses and hundreds of dishes, with each item paraded in as a symbol of wealth and dominance. No refrigeration meant much of it was, let's say, aged. And not always in a good way. A quirky tidbit. It was considered very fancy to paint food with gold leaf. Yes, actual gold. While you, poor cook, gnawed on crusts scraped from the hearth, his lordship was eating metal for lunch. The feast drags into evening, jesters cavort, goblets are spilled. A noblewoman mistakes you for a table and rests her plate on your back. You don't complain. You simply exist, as all castle cooks do, unseen, exhausted, and ready to burst into flame at any moment. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coos. It's probably mocking you. You dream of flavour, though not in the way modern chefs do, with talk of umami and balance and plating with tweezers. No, your dreams smell of boiled leeks and burnt barley, and occasionally taste like chicken that has, quite definitely, already expired. Welcome to the realm of bizarre medieval recipes, where culinary innovation often just means stuffing one animal inside another and praying the results don't kill anyone important. Your day begins with a lesson in seasoning, courtesy of a man called Roger the Dry. No one remembers why he's called that, except perhaps that he's never blinked, never smiled, and once seasoned an entire stew with what turned out to be powdered chalk. Today, he's instructing you in making garbage pie, an actual term from the 15th century, composed of giblets, tongues, and other edible mysteries best not named aloud. Historians still argue whether these kinds of dishes were delicacies, or just acts of culinary desperation. You're tasked with sourcing ingredients, which is a generous term. Sourcing means venturing into the storage shed, affectionately known as the reek. You pass through its splintered door into a sensory ambush. Spices spilled on rotting pears, sacks of flour sweating in their own mildew, and a tub of eels that have achieved sentience. You choose the least sentient of them and retreat quickly. Let's talk ingredients, shall we? Freshness is a myth, like dragons or polite knights. Nearly everything you cook with is preserved in the medieval Holy Trinity: salt, vinegar, or hope. Meat? salted until it's indistinguishable from leather. Fish? Smoked so thoroughly it's basically wood. Vegetables? Boiled to oblivion, then served again tomorrow, just to be sure any remaining nutrients are properly eliminated. You recall a recent dish Morwenna referred to as white pot. It involved boiling milk, mixing it with breadcrumbs, raisins and suet, then baking it until it resembled something between pudding and masonry. The Lord declared it acceptable. Morwenna wept with joy. You wept with exhaustion. And let's not forget the Greek pies. Enormous meat pies stuffed with whatever creatures were available. Rabbits, birds, sometimes hedgehogs, and then decorated with little pastry towers or moulded sugar figurines. Presentation is everything. If you've ever spent 4 hours sculpting an edible griffin out of chicken liver paste, you might understand. One time, someone suggested garnishing a fish with actual rose petals soaked in vinegar. That same day, Geoffrey the butcher sneezed directly into the pastry flour. Balance, as always, is maintained. It's not that food safety is ignored, it's that the very idea doesn't exist. You taste test suspicious cream by smell alone. Eggs are judged by floating them in water. And a chicken is considered fine if only some of it is green. That's why so many dishes rely heavily on spices, not to elevate flavour, but to smother the evidence. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Medieval cooks believed in humoral theory. That is, foods were classified as hot, cold, moist or dry, and your job was to balance these humours in the dish. So if the Lord was feeling too melancholic, you'd be expected to cook him dried pears poached in red wine, because science. One dish today involves almond milk, a prized ingredient, not because of dietary trends, but because actual milk spoils faster than a minstrel's punchline. You make it by mashing almonds into paste, mixing it with water, and straining it through increasingly filthy linen. You do this beside Geoffrey, who's currently sharpening his cleaver on what might be a petrified turnip. The recipe calls for a quart of almond milk, a handful of dates, 3 eggs, and a dash of powder douce. Powder douce is a real thing. It's a sweet spice blend, though what exactly goes in it varies. Morwenna's version contains cinnamon, sugar, and a tiny bitter root she refuses to identify. You suspect it's a cursed relic. Everything takes forever. Nothing is measured. Recipes are vague nonsense passed down orally or scratched on vellum by scribes who clearly had no concept of time or proportion. Cook it till it be done, one says. Another recommends baking the tart until it blusheth. You assume that means golden, brown, or perhaps emotionally ashamed of itself. You mess up once today, just once. You forget to soak the dried figs. Now they're as chewy as old leather and twice as bitter. Morwenna does not speak. She simply slams the tray on the counter and begins praying very loudly. You take the hint and start again. Occasionally, a noble will wander into the kitchen to make a suggestion. Today, it's Sir Elric, a man whose taste buds have been thoroughly destroyed by a lifetime of overly salted boar and trauma. He insists that the fish should be dyed blue for the feast. You ask stupidly, what with? He replies, crushed lapis lazuli, a pigment, not edible. He leaves before you can explain this. You end up using boiled cabbage water and hoping no one notices. Some recipes are charmingly absurd. There's a jelly made from pike skin that shimmers when cut. A tart shaped like a castle tower filled with custard and raisins, because raisins go in everything, for some reason. There's even something called cockentrice, which is half pig, half bird, sewn together like a Frankenstein's entree. You once made one and gave it goose wings. The Lord clapped. A squire vomited. At one point today, you find yourself stuffing cloves into an apple, which is then stuffed into a duck, which is then stuffed into a hare. It's culinary Russian nesting dolls, but each layer is increasingly suspicious and vaguely sticky. And yet, amidst all this, there's a certain bizarre pride. You've created things that make knights grunt in approval. You've seasoned dishes that made priests bless themselves. You've plated food so absurd it made grown men cry, though that might have been the spice level. Your mainstream historical fact. Recipes from actual medieval cookbooks like The Form of Curie. compiled by King Richard II's cooks in the 14th century, offer a strange but detailed glimpse into noble cuisine. They feature everything from peacock pie to eel stew, and nearly all of them require ingredients no peasant ever dreamed of. And so, another day of culinary experimentation lurches to a close. You wipe your hands on your apron, smear a questionable grease trail down your tunic, and glance at the recipe list for tomorrow. The first item? Blank manger. A rice dish with almonds, chicken and sugar. It's meant to comfort the sick. It will almost certainly not. The rats gather, hopeful. One drags away an onion like a tiny, determined greengrocer. You let him go. He's earned it. You, too, retreat. Face soot-slicked, arms shaking, lips crusted with salt. The kitchen fades to a murmur behind you. Your stomach rumbles. You chew a raw leek out of sheer spite. Tomorrow, you'll make a pudding that may or may not explode. There's a saying in the kitchen, better the fire than Morwenna's wrath. And tonight, as you return from a brief moment of silence in the dark courtyard, where you pretended to be inspecting herb pots, but were really just trying not to cry, you realize why. It's time for kitchen hierarchy's hazards, otherwise known as how not to get flayed by your co-workers. You step back inside, and instantly you feel the power dynamic hit you like the heat of the hearth. You're not at the bottom of the pecking order. That would be the grease boy, who literally scrapes drippings from pans and often ends up wearing more than he collects. But you're close. Maybe one rung above, possibly tied. Medieval castle kitchens are not democratic spaces. They're feudal microcosms, only sweatier, with more knives. At the top sits the head cook, and beneath them, a crusty pyramid of pain. Morwenna rules with a ladle of iron. She knows everyone's weakness, and has weaponized soup against multiple apprentices. She has outlasted 3 lords, 2 sieges, and 1 attempted coup via undercooked pheasant. She will outlive you all. Below Morwenna are the master bakers, the meat marshal, that's Geoffrey, the sorcerer, yes, that's what they call the sauce guy, and the spit crew. Then come the scullions, runners, spice grinders, laundry stewers, and fire feeders. You are one of those in-betweeners, occasionally allowed near the salt, but never near the wine. And then there's the turnbroach. Poor Bertram. The lad tied to the spit again, slowly rotating beef over an open flame like some sort of protein-based sundial. He tried to unionize once. He still limps. In theory, it's a team. In reality, it's a stress stream with knives. No one wants to be blamed for a bad dish. If the bread doesn't rise, the baker swears it's your fault for opening the oven too soon. If the stew tastes like sadness, Geoffrey says your herbs were cursed. If the pottage has a rat tail in it, well, that one's probably true, but still. You're always in someone's way. Carry water from the well too slowly, and you're lazy. Too fast, and you splash it on the flour sack, and now you're an idiot. There's no winning. The kitchen is its own battlefield, and flour bombs are real. And oh, the hazards. Every surface is hot, sharp, or slippery. Sometimes all 3. The hearth spits coals. The knives are dull in all the wrong ways. Useless when you need precision. Lethal when dropped. You've seen a man lose a fingernail to a wayward leak. You once got a burn so oddly shaped it looked like a map of Wales. Morwenna called it character building. You called it infected. One time, you tried to wipe down a workbench without checking it first. A bone needle embedded in your palm like a secret insult. Another day, you stepped on a fish spine and bled into your shoe until you fainted in the larder. You were revived with onion vinegar and a hearty slap. Oh, and don't even think about complaining. The steward doesn't want to hear about your accidents or your gushing wounds. Unless the wound is directly inside the pie, it's not his concern. Morwenna says the kitchen sorts the weak from the dead, and that's generous. Some don't even get a burial. Just a quiet, sudden absence, and a new lad replacing them by dawn. And yet, hierarchy also protects. If you know how to use it. You've learned to carry things at just the right angle so others think you're delivering them for someone more important. You've mastered the art of standing very still in shadowy corners, looking urgently occupied with nothing. It's camouflage. It's survival. Sometimes, when the heat gets too much and the yelling blurs into background noise, you imagine being a noble, just for a moment, sitting in the great hall, ordering mead, asking whether the duck was raised, free range. None were. They were caught with nets and shouted at. But then Morwenna yells your name, and your dream vanishes in a puff of scalding broth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Large kitchens in noble castles could have up to 200 staff during major feast preparations. That's 200 people jostling for space around a fire the size of a small house, all trying not to die or disappoint. Your quirky tidbit? The turnbrooch, the poor soul responsible for rotating meat, was often a child or small servant boy. But in wealthier castles, they built rotating machines powered by dogs running on a wheel. Yes, dog-powered roast. It's basically the medieval version of an air fryer, if the air fryer had paws and a guilt complex. Meanwhile, tensions in the kitchen simmer like the soup pot. Gossip flows faster than gravy. Bertram's been muttering about how the sorcerer shorted him spice last week. The scullions are stealing dried fruit to ferment into raisin wine, which tastes like regret and gives you visions. And someone left the milk out again, which means you're about to see a grown man weep over curdled lumps. Historians still argue whether medieval kitchens were truly as hostile as records suggest, or if surviving accounts simply reflect rare, dramatic events. But judging by the fact that Morwenna once chased a thief through 3 corridors while still holding a boiling pot, you lean toward hostile. Morwenna, by the way, shows affection by letting you live. She once complimented your carrot dice by not flinging them at your head. She tolerates you, which in kitchen terms is basically love. You remember once laughing, just once, when Bertram slipped on a goose liver and did a pirouette into the firewood pile. Morwenna didn't scold you. She just handed you the spit and said, "Your turn." You turned that pork for 6 straight hours. Your arms still ache. The worst part of the hierarchy is how it follows you outside the kitchen. In the great hall, you're a ghost. When you do get a leftover scrap, you eat it crouched in the corner, next to the dogs, who frankly get better scraps than you. A noble once stepped on you by accident and said, "Oh, I thought you were a cushion." But there's power in knowing your place, because it means you know everyone else is too. You know that the meat marshal is secretly terrified of rats. You know the sorcerer's secret stash of nutmeg is hidden behind the flour sacks. And you know that if you ever want to get ahead, you'll need to outlast all of them, or learn to fake your own death and flee to the forest. Tonight, as you clean up after another marathon meal, Morwenna walks by and pauses. You brace for insult. But she just grunts. "That pigeon stew didn't kill anyone. Not bad." Then she walks away. It's the closest you'll get to a compliment. You smile, and promptly burn your hand on a pot handle. Some lessons come slowly. It is the day of St. Wilgefortis, which means, of course, a festival feast. You, dear exhausted turnip of a human, are now deep in the sticky trenches of festival's fatal mistakes, the part of castle life where every dish must sparkle, every goblet must overflow, and every cook must survive without losing a hand, their temper, or what little remains of their sanity. Today is not like other days. It is, somehow, worse. You wake not to the usual rat nibble or Morwenna's boot in your ribs, but to the unholy toll of the feast bell, echoing across stone like a funeral chime, which in many ways it is. You are summoned to begin the holy ritual of overfeeding noblemen until their doublets burst and the wine runs out of their noses. Preparation began 3 days ago. But that doesn't matter now, because no one remembered to soak the peas overnight, and now you're trying to rehydrate them over a fire that just this morning decided to behave like it has emotions. The spit is moody, the pies are puffing unevenly, and someone, left a bucket of fish heads in the sun. It's barely dawn, and the kitchen already smells like a crime. Festivals in a medieval castle are not charming affairs with bunting and smiling jugglers. They are chaotic pageants of culinary flexing, where the lord must prove he can afford more spices than sense, and where every course is designed to impress, confuse, or alarm the guests. Morwenna is in her full battle regalia, apron tied like chainmail, a ladle strapped to her hip like a short sword. Her face is beet red from shouting before breakfast, You haven't seen her blink in hours. The menu includes such hits as peacock refeathered and posed mid-screech, with its beak stuffed full of cloves, pottage of 15 vegetables, none of which are currently in season, stuffed carp with almond glaze, resting on a bed of poetry, whatever that means, a tart of live frogs, to be presented mid-course for the amusement, or trauma, of the guests. Your job? Everything else. You're boiling leeks, you're basting venison, you're scalding your wrist on a tray of hastily sugared walnuts because Sir Alaric's wife likes something sweet between courses. The kitchen is a war zone. Someone's dropped a bowl of hot honey onto the floor, which now functions as a medieval glue trap. You lose a shoe. You consider leaving it and starting a new life barefoot. And all the while, the clock of doom ticks forward. Every task feels like juggling eels with buttered fingers. Burn the roast, and the Lord's mood may turn sour enough to cancel your monthly oat ration. Undersalt the pottage, and you may find yourself reclassified as livestock. One forgotten garnish, and Morwenna will assign you to the offal pile for a week. Still, you soldier on. The musicians arrive. They warm up by tuning their lutes directly in the kitchen because acoustics and also complete disrespect. A goat somehow wanders in. No one knows whose it is. It eats half a wheel of cheese and leaves, unimpressed. Now the real pressure begins. Plating. You're assembling dishes that are more sculpture than sustenance. Sugar castles, pastry dragons, layered pies shaped like celestial maps. Each one must be perfect. You once saw Morwenna slice open a custard tart with surgical precision because the glaze wasn't wistful enough. Then come the live frogs. Apparently, it's tradition. Don't ask whose. To release them during the second course, so the guests can shriek with mirth and spill wine everywhere. You're given the honour of handling them. You, with your trembling hands and already soup-stained tunic, you lift the lid off the frog crate, and of course, they're gone. Panic doesn't quite cover the sensation. It's more like a full-body stutter. You look around. One frog is perched majestically atop the stew pot, another in the flour sack. A third is squatting inside a helmet left behind by the porter. You recover what you can and hide the rest in the herb box. Then there's the dish that does you in, the ambrosial bread swans. They were supposed to be simple, a bit of dough, shaped into noble aquatic forms, baked golden and served with rosewater. Instead, they puff into what can only be described as angry bread geese. You place them on the tray anyway, muttering a quiet prayer to Saint Honoratus, patron of bakers and the doomed. As you're lining them up, the door creaks open. The steward glides in. The hush is immediate. Even the fire seems to pause its crackling. The steward's robe whispers behind him, like a curtain of judgment. He sniffs, and points, at your bread swans. You freeze. Everyone freezes. They look, he says slowly, somewhat aggressive. A silence so thick you could ladle it settles over the kitchen. Morwenna, remarkably, does not explode. She merely says, "They're war swans." The steward blinks, nods once. Very good. You live to bake another day. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval feast days were often tied to religious calendars, and some castles hosted elaborate banquets for saints' days, coronations, and treaty signings. These feasts could last hours, sometimes even days, with performances, pageants, and grotesquely abundant food. And here's a delightful tidbit. There was an actual medieval cookbook, Le Viandier, that included instructions for dyeing a chicken bright green. Why? Because if your poultry didn't look like a basilisk, were you really living? Historians still argue whether these flamboyant displays were truly enjoyed by guests or endured out of politeness and fear. You suspect a bit of both, especially after watching a knight silently weep while biting into something called porpoise infirmity. The final moments before service are pure chaos. You're carrying trays the size of sleds. Someone is shouting about missing candied violets. A fire breaks out in the bread oven and is extinguished with a bucket of ale. The goat returns. No one stops it. The food is paraded into the hall with all the pomp of a royal procession. You march alongside a roasted stag with antlers dipped in wax and lit like candelabras. Nobles applaud. You cannot feel your arms. And then, disaster. A lord bites into the almond-glazed carp and pauses. He frowns. He raises a single brow. "This tastes," he says, "like goat." The kitchen stops breathing. Your soul leaves your body. He chews again. "I like it." You nearly drop a tray in relief. The night ends in greasy triumph. You are battered, singed, and flecked with frog, but still standing. You've survived another festival. Your reward? The leftovers. The warm corner by the hearth, and a bruised apple someone forgot to throw away. You eat it like a king. The fog hugs your boots like a drunk uncle at a funeral, thick and clingy and reeking faintly of rot and fish. You can barely see the warrior 10 paces ahead of you, and that's assuming he hasn't already fallen into the Thames, or been impaled by one of those charming little surprise stakes the English are so fond of hiding in the muck. Welcome to fog, fury, and Danish feet, where your job is to storm a bridge in the name of King Cnut, a man whose name sounds like a joke but whose temper decidedly is not. It is the year 1014, and you, lucky soul, are one of Cnut's elite bodyguards, his huskars. Not that the term elite means you have armour that fits or boots that match, but you are slightly less likely to die screaming than the average conscript. Slightly. London Bridge lies ahead. Sort of. Mostly it lies shrouded in fog and fury and what might be the screams of a baker caught in the crossfire. Cnut wants it taken, and so you, with axe in hand and exactly one dry toe remaining, trudge forward with your equally grumpy brethren. The bridge is not the charming nursery rhyme version. No singing. No merry maidens dancing. This is a rickety mass of planks and spite, lashed together with rope, ambition, and the blood of unfortunate carpenters. It is both lifeline and battleground. A wooden bottleneck over a sluggish, sludge-brown river. The plan, if you can call it that, is simple. Storm the bridge, take London, and make the king look good in front of the Danes, the Saxons, and possibly God. Historians still argue whether the bridge was fully fortified or just packed with panicked defenders and boiling pitch. But either way, it's your problem now. Your boots squelch in the riverbank mire as you tighten the strap on your helmet, which is actually too small and gives you a headache that feels religious in nature. To your left, Bjarka is gnawing on a strip of dried horse meat, muttering a prayer to Thor. To your right, Ulfric is vomiting behind a bush. Not from fear, but from last night's eel stew, which probably violated several natural laws. You are, in a word, ready. King Cnut stands tall on a muddy rise, a beacon of confidence and war paint. His hair is braided, his beard oiled, and his expression says he very much expects you to succeed or die trying. Preferably both, but in that order. He raises his axe, and the signal is given. You move. The sound begins low. Wooden shields knocking, feet thudding, battle chants rising from Viking throats like cursed choir hymns. The fog churns with movement, and the bridge looms closer, its silhouette jutting across the water like the spine of some ancient sea creature. And then the arrows come. They hiss from the mist like angry bees, thunking into shields, legs, and one particularly unlucky man's face. You lower your shield just in time to see the first wave collapse, slipping on the moss-slick planks. It's not the arrows that kill most of them, it's gravity and poor carpentry. You charge anyway, because that's what you do. You charge into fog and splinters and the stink of river slime, teeth bared, axe raised, howling something that might be poetry if anyone understood Old Norse under this much stress. Your feet hit the bridge. It sways, not reassuringly, more like a death invitation. Your first kill is a man in monk's robes swinging a mace the size of a toddler. You don't ask questions. You duck, swing, and he vanishes over the side in a spray of fabric and curses. A second defender lunges with a spear. You sidestep, your boot catches, and you both go down in a tumble that ends with your face in a patch of goose droppings. You're pretty sure the goose is still around, watching. There's shouting, screaming, a sudden fireball, and someone yelling about fish oil. You don't look, you just keep moving. Your mainstream historical fact for the night. The real-life assault on London Bridge by Cnut's forces was part of his attempt to wrest the English crown from King Ethelred. Some accounts claim the Danes used boats with roofs made of wicker and wet hides to shield against missiles as they soared through the bridge supports. You, tragically, are on top of the bridge and do not have a boat. You have a headache. London's defenders are nothing if not inventive. Boiling water, flaming pitch, mystery projectiles involving chamber pots. It's all fair game. You see one man trip over a severed hand and keep running. Another tries to flee and is clubbed from behind by his own side for cowardice. Teamwork. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval defenders would place beehives atop their walls and fling them down at attackers. You pray that doesn't happen today. You're allergic. Probably. A horn sounds from behind. Reinforcements. More Danes. More shouting. More chances to be impaled. You catch a glimpse of Bjarke again, his face smeared with ash, holding what appears to be a chair leg. You don't ask. He's doing great. You fight and slip and fight again. A piece of bridge breaks off beneath a screaming Saxon, and he plummets into the Thames, thrashing until the river claims him. The mist eats his screams. Eventually, you reach the bridge's centre. It is chaos incarnate. Blood slicks the planks. The fog swirls like a living thing. You plant your feet, raise your shield, and try not to die. Behind you, the bridge groans. Not from the weight, though you're all built like beer barrels, but from fire. Someone, somewhere has set part of it alight. Cnut's idea, maybe? You don't know. You don't care. You just keep swinging. This is what it means to storm London Bridge. This is what it means to be Cnut's bodyguard. And somehow, through stupidity, stubbornness, and the sheer weight of too many angry Danes, you push forward. The defenders falter. A shout goes up. The bridge is breaking. But it's yours. Victory is close. So is tetanus. Your legs are jelly, your breath a wheeze that makes you sound like a winded goat, and your axe is now mostly handle, its blade wedged somewhere in a dead man's clavicle several yards back. But somehow, miraculously, you're still standing on what may generously be called a bridge, though it currently resembles a collapsing bookshelf set on fire by someone with anger management issues. Welcome to Bridge of Bones and Bile, where you and your fellow Huskarls are learning the hard way that storming a fortified medieval bridge is equal parts warfare, river ballet, and existential crisis. The wood under your boots is slick with blood. Yours, theirs, and probably some unfortunate fish. It tilts at an angle no bridge should ever embrace. Planks groan, some outright snap, and a Viking ahead of you vanishes with a splash and a string of words that probably cursed 3 generations of fish. And yet, forward, always forward. You wedge yourself between 2 fallen shields, both sticky and still warm, and brace your weight as a hail of arrows whips past your ear. Somewhere behind you, a Dane sings something loud and enthusiastic in Old Norse. Judging by the tone, it's either a battle hymn or a drinking song about sheep, possibly both. The defenders aren't giving up easily. London's citizens may have strange accents and terrible bread, but by Thor's flaming beard, they are creative when it comes to murder. A monk just hurled a chamber pot from an upper window, hitting Ulfric square in the chest. He goes down, sputtering and cursing and smelling like sin. From a side turret, a woman throws what appears to be a wheel of cheese. It connects with a satisfying thunk, and the recipient stumbles off the side of the bridge, bested by dairy. And the pitch. Oh gods, the pitch. It rains down in globs like angry tar spirits, bubbling and sizzling when it hits flesh. The smell alone is a crime. You duck behind a broken railing, just in time to avoid a dollop the size of a roast duck. It lands beside you, hissing like a cat on fire. Historians still argue whether boiling liquids were used as widely as legends suggest, but here and now, your skin definitely believes they were. And worse still, it seems someone in the city has access to bees. You spot a basket hurtling down from above, bursting open in mid-air like some terrible honey-scented grenade. Screams follow. The bees have chosen violence. Amid all this chaos, the bridge itself fights back. It creaks and splinters, shedding support beams like a snake sheds skin. You lurch forward as one post collapses behind you, taking 3 men with it into the sluggish black water below. The Thames, thick with the runoff of London life, accepts them with a gulp. The stench is unbearable. River rot, sweat, blood, pitch, burning wood, and what can only be described as fortified goose droppings. The Thames, once a source of life, is now a soup of corpses and regret. If you fall in, your comrades may not even try to fish you out. It's not bravery that keeps you upright. It's the knowledge that the water might actually be worse. But you're not alone. Around you, Huskarls fight like men possessed. Half are shirtless, several barefoot, and one appears to be swinging a leg bone like a mace. Their loyalty to Cnut is not based on coin or comfort. It's more primal than that. Born of cold nights, shared mead, and the grim camaraderie of endless war. Quirky fact: the Huskarls were some of the most feared warriors in Europe. Elite household troops, sworn to die for their lord. They wielded massive two-handed axes and had a habit of charging into hopeless fights with cheerful abandon. Think of them as the medieval version of a heavily armed fan club. The bridge begins to shift. Not metaphorically, physically. It's swaying under the weight of too many warriors and not enough sound engineering. You press forward, half marching, half crawling, flanked by berserkers who grin like lunatics as they wade through gore. One of them, Einar, you think, has strapped a pot to his head for extra protection. He claims it's lucky. It is dented in 5 places. You duck again as a bolt thunks into the timber beside your face. A London archer has taken up position on the far tower, firing down with the serenity of a man who knows he's out of axe range. You grab a nearby corpse. Don't think about it. And use it as a shield, wincing as arrows embed into what was once a perfectly nice Saxon tax collector. Your mainstream historical fact: London Bridge in 1014 wasn't just a crossing, it was a fortress. Lined with defensive towers and controlled access points, it served as both chokehold and status symbol. Cnut knew if he took the bridge, he'd taken the heart of the city. And, speaking of hearts, yours is pounding loud enough to qualify as music. At the midpoint you pause. Not because you're tired, though you are, or afraid, though definitely that, but because the bridge itself is giving out. A low groan builds beneath your feet. The kind that says, "I was not meant to carry this many lunatics with axes." Suddenly, a roar goes up. Not from the front, not from the rear. From below, you glance over the edge. Boats. Long, low, covered boats, with hides stretched across their roofs. Danes. Your Danes. They row beneath the bridge like dark shadows, invisible in the mist. One Huskarl reaches up with a saw and begins to hack at a support beam. Of course, this was the real plan. Historians debate whether it worked precisely this way, but according to Norse sagas, the Danes pulled the bridge down by attacking from underneath, while distracting the defenders above. Judging by the sudden lurch and the panicked screams from both sides, it's working. The bridge begins to break apart. It's like standing on a dying whale. The wood heaves, sections drop, screams rise. You leap forward just in time, scrambling over what was once a cart ramp and is now just a pile of splinters. Behind you, half the structure collapses into the Thames with a bellowing crack that echoes for miles. You don't look back. You run, or limp, or stagger, possibly crawl. It's hard to say. But you're off the bridge, onto the other side, soaked in blood and splinters and bits of eel for some reason. The defenders flee. The city gate looms ahead. The fighting's not done, but the bridge, London's pride and lifeline, belongs to Cnut now. You plant your foot on solid ground and scream in triumph, then immediately fall over from exhaustion. The bees did not follow, thank the gods. You wake to the sound of chewing. Bjark is gnawing on something disturbingly crunchy beside your head. You're fairly certain it's not food. You're also fairly certain you're not dead, which is either a small miracle or a terrible mistake. Either way, you've survived the bridge. Congratulations. Time to face axe brothers and berserker breakfasts. where rest is a luxury and bonding happens over trauma and mildly sentient porridge. The ground beneath you is blessedly solid, which would be more comforting if it weren't also muddy, cold, and inexplicably full of broken pottery shards. You sit up slowly. Every part of your body registers a formal complaint. Your right arm twitches. Your left foot doesn't feel attached anymore. And there's a goose feather in your helmet. You don't ask. The bridge lies behind you now, or rather, what's left of it. A charred, skeletal half-structure still juts from the river like a snapped spine. Cnut's forces have taken the south bank, and Londoners, deciding they value their heads more than their bridge, have retreated into the city proper. Victory? Sort of. The gates are still closed, and the city has plenty of ways to say, go away. But for now, there is rest, which means food, which means, unfortunately, breakfast with your brothers in arms. Now, when most people imagine Viking meals, they picture roaring hearths, roasted meats, and perhaps a tankard of mead. What you actually get is a dented pot full of grey sludge that smells like despair and tastes like tree bark soaked in regret. Gruet, someone calls it. The ingredients are a mystery. You spot oats, cabbage, a finger-shaped root, you hope it's a root, and something that might once have been a pickled egg. Bjarke offers you a scoop from his wooden bowl. You accept, because saying no to Bjarke is a gamble that often ends in bruising. You chew. It squeaks. Across the fire, Ulfric is sharpening his axe with a rock and humming what sounds like a lullaby, except it includes words like entrails and throat flute. He's wrapped in a wolfskin cloak that still smells faintly of wolf. Beside him, a man known only as Gut is trying to cook what's left of a pigeon over the open flames. It keeps falling in. He doesn't seem to mind. The fire crackles, not out of warmth but necessity. The air is cold and wet, and most of you are wearing yesterday's wounds like accessories. One man, Jorund, maybe, has a bandage on his face that is mostly wine-soaked linen and optimism. Another is missing a few fingers and claims it was a voluntary offering to Odin. You suspect it was a door hinge accident. There is laughter, though. Hoarse and painful, but genuine. Someone retells the story of Einar slipping on the bridge and knocking over 3 Saxons like meat skittles. Another mimics the nobleman who tripped over his own sword, trying to flee. You're all broken, bruised and bleeding, but also victorious. And in Viking terms, that's breakfast conversation. Mainstream historical fact. Huskarls were not just Cnut's personal guard. They were an institution. Well-trained, well-equipped, and often paid in land, they served as both muscle and status symbol. In battle, their two-handed axes could cleave through mail and bone alike, which made them terrifying and deeply impractical in cramped spaces, like, say, a collapsing bridge. Of course, not all Huskarls were towering giants of muscle and beard. Some were wiry, quick-footed fighters from the fringes of the empire. Others were bards who also fought, poorly, but could compose excellent funeral dirges on demand. You, dear listener, fall somewhere in between. Just competent enough to survive, just unlucky enough to keep getting assigned to the worst jobs. You look around the camp. Tents? Don't be ridiculous. You have a wet blanket, a bench shield to sit on, and a helmet that doubles as your pillow. Luxury. Your quirky tidbit for today. Vikings believed in blood brothers, sworn companions who would fight, feast, and fall together. Some even mingled their blood in sacred rituals. Your group skips the ritual part, mostly because everyone here has too many open wounds already. You share mead instead. And bread. And sometimes, regrettably, lice. The mead arrives. Someone had the foresight to loot a merchant barge, and now sweet, burning drink is passed around in a communal horn that smells faintly of fish. You take a sip. It warms your throat and briefly tricks your body into thinking it's not falling apart. Conversation turns to the next stage. London's still closed to you. Rumours swirl. Some say the city will surrender by nightfall. Others whisper of reinforcements from Ethelred, the uncounselled king. No one knows for sure. You just know Cnut will expect you to be ready, battle-worn or not. Someone starts a chant. soft at first, then louder. It's not quite a war song, more of a celebratory threat. Half the men join in, the other half try to sleep. You do neither. Instead, you clean your axe, what's left of it, and check your boots for leeches. You find two. Nearby, Bjark is rebraiding his beard, occasionally weaving in bits of metal for style. Ulfric has passed out against a tree, snoring like a dying walrus. Gut is now gnawing on a pigeon foot with the casual detachment of someone who has seen too much. And you? You stare into the fire and think about tomorrow. You've stormed a bridge, watched men die by cheese wheel, and eaten porridge that may have been sentient. But London isn't yours yet. Cnut's conquest continues, and where he goes, you follow. Because you are a Huskarl. Because your brothers are beside you. Because you've come too far to stop now. And because if you fall asleep too long, Bjarke will eat your share of lunch. Your rest is short-lived. By the time the sun cracks through the grey sky like an egg-bleeding weak yolk, you're being kicked awake with a boot to the ribs and a hearty, "Rise and fight, you lumpy dog's backside." A classic Bjarke greeting. Your entire body protests, but your ears catch the sound that makes your stomach twist. Bells. Church bells, alarm bells, and the distant cry of Londoners doing what Londoners do best when under siege, screaming creatively while setting things on fire. Welcome to Londoners and their lovely murder tricks, where the locals prove they might not be great warriors, but they sure are inventive when it comes to home defence. The city walls are still shut, but that hasn't stopped the capital's residents from engaging in open warfare with whatever's at hand. The first trick of the day? Arrows dipped in lime juice. You're not sure if it's a symbolic insult or a very early marinade attempt, but it stings like sin and makes one poor Huskarl scream so loudly he's later mistaken for a horn. You rush toward the riverfront again, shield slung over your shoulder like a grumpy tortoise, expecting the usual stones, fire, angry monks. What you get instead is geese. Dozens of them. Live, angry, hissing. Launched via crude catapult from inside the city walls. The first wave slams into your front lines, feathers flying, wings flapping. One attaches itself to a Huskarl's face and refuses to let go. He swings blindly, topples backward, and takes out two comrades with him. You have faced arrows, boiling tar, even bees, but nothing quite prepares you for weaponized poultry. Is this war? Ulfric mutters, holding a shield now slick with goose droppings. I think it's just Tuesday in London. You press on. Cnut, ever the charismatic chaos magnet, has rallied the men again. His golden-haired figure stands on a supply crate, barking orders in a voice that could curdle milk. He wants a show of force. Something to make the Londoners second-guess their stubbornness. So naturally someone suggests fire. A dozen Huskarls, including you, are sent to set up the fireships. Longboats packed with hay, pitch, and the general mood of, let's see what happens. You push them into the Thames with torches ready, aiming them straight at the city's river gate. The water catches reflections of fire and fury as the boats drift slowly toward their target. Then the tide turns. Literally, the current betrays you, swirling the flaming vessels back toward your own lines. Panic ensues. The entire right flank has to dive into the mud to avoid becoming roast pork. "Well," says Gut, brushing cinders off his beard, "that went well." You abandon the fire plan and return to traditional methods, yelling and throwing things. Your army launches every object that can be lifted and flung. Rocks, old helmets, partially eaten loaves of bread. The Londoners respond in kind with chamber pots, old shoes, bricks, and, at one point, what appears to be a lute. Someone retrieves the lute. It still plays. You consider taking it as a trophy. Mainstream historical fact: London in the early 11th century was a dense, chaotic city with wooden homes, narrow alleys, and plenty of overhead structures perfect for ambushes. Urban warfare wasn't just fought with blades. It involved civilians, household items, and a great deal of shouting from windows. You charge the gate next. Not the big one. Too obvious. A side postern, hidden behind a crooked wall and a cart full of turnips. You and three others, Bjarke, Ulfric, and someone you've never seen before but who claims to be a prince's cousin. He probably isn't. Sneak your way forward. You creep under cover of a fog-thick morning. The mud muffles your steps. The prince's cousin sneezes violently and is immediately pelted with 3 turnips from above. You all scatter. From behind the walls, a Londoner begins to sing. Not a hymn. Something vulgar about Danes and their mothers. Bjark applauds. You regroup by a burnt-out bakery. The smell of half-charred bread lingers, oddly comforting. Then comes the second surprise of the morning. Bees again. You hear the buzzing before you see them. Some London genius has tied several hives to the city gate, along with a crank mechanism. As you watch in horror, the crank turns and the hives drop. The bees, now deeply offended, explode outward in furious clouds. You run. Not bravely. Not strategically. Just away. Historians still debate whether bees were truly used in defense tactics. Some believe it's a later embellishment, added for flair. But after today, you're fully convinced the people of London had a surplus of bees and a shortage of shame. You regroup with the main force. Cnut is pacing, muttering in Norse. His royal cloak is singed, his crown slightly askew. He does not look pleased. He orders a direct assault at the western wall. You prepare yourself for the climb. The ladders are brought forth. Rickety, crooked things built by men, with more optimism than carpentry skills. You hoist yours, say a quiet prayer to whichever god is still listening, and begin the ascent. Rocks rain down. Arrows whistle past. Someone dumps what smells like pickled onions on you. Your hands slip. Your knees wobble. But somehow, you reach the top, only to be met by a tiny old woman with a frying pan. She hits you. Hard. You fall. Again. You land on Bjark, who breaks your fall with an oof and a punch to the side. Warn me next time, he grunts, shoving you off. I think you broke my spleen. You lie in the mud for a moment, staring at the sky. A pigeon flies overhead. It poops. The poop hits your forehead. You close your eyes. Quirky tidbit. Pigeon poop was considered mildly lucky in some Norse traditions. You're not feeling it. Evening comes. The attack is repelled again, but the bridge is yours. The gate damaged. The defenders tired. Cnut somehow is still smiling. We'll try again tomorrow, he says, as if tomorrow won't be filled with more bees, geese, and weaponized onions. You nod. Not because you agree, but because you're too tired to shake your head. The campfire sputters that night. You eat more porridge. You remove the goose feather from your helmet. You try not to cry. Londoners are clever. Too clever. You miss fighting monks. They rarely used bees. The final morning rises like a reluctant debtor, late, groaning, and draped in fog again. Your bones ache. Your face still smells faintly of pigeon, and you're reasonably sure your boots are growing things. But the air feels different today. Heavier. Charged. There's a quiet hum through the camp. Not excitement. No, that would require optimism. This is something else. A hushed anticipation. It's time for victory, splinters, and royal disappointment. The glorious climax where blood is spilled, glory is claimed, and your king forgets your name entirely. Today, you're not storming the bridge. You already did that. Barely. Today, you're storming the walls. Cnut's plan is simple. Break the western gate open with a battering ram fashioned from an old tree trunk and too much confidence. Meanwhile, archers provide cover, and you, the Huskills, charge in as soon as there's a crack wide enough to slip a bearded man through. Morwen the carpenter is the one who built the ram. It's beautiful. Thick, iron-tipped, carved with runes. It also took out 3 tents, just being rolled into position. You admire it the way a man admires something that's about to kill him. You're assigned to the second wave. First wave usually dies. Second wave occasionally survives to tell the story with extra drama. The ramming begins. The gate shudders. Dust rains down from the wall. A hinge pops loose like a tooth flying from a bar brawl. Then the archers scream. Archers always scream, and the air becomes whistling death. You crouch behind a broken shield, hands trembling not from fear, but sheer exhaustion. At this point, you'd honestly be grateful for a brief nap, even if it came with impalement. Someone yells, "Breakthrough!" and the world tilts forward. You sprint, awkwardly, limping slightly on your left leg, but sprinting nonetheless. The gap is just wide enough. You squeeze through after Bjark, who has once again opted to go shirtless and is swinging his axe like it insulted his mother. Inside is chaos. Smoke, fire, and Saxons. Lots of Saxons. Some wearing armour, some wearing nightshirts. One appears to be wearing a pie. You don't ask. Your axe bites. Your shield breaks. Your head rings from a club to the helmet that knocks your ears into retirement. You press forward, side by side with your brothers in arms. The narrow streets of London funnel the battle into vicious, cramped knots. Blood on cobblestones. Shouts echoing off timber walls. Mainstream historical fact. Cnut did in fact besiege London multiple times in his campaign for the English throne. The final push saw him take control of the city after a grueling series of assaults, negotiations, and naval blockades. No single victory, but a slow grind to domination. You duck into a bakery that's on fire and emerge with half a loaf in your mouth. War bread, crunchy and filled with ash. Somewhere near the old Roman wall, a war horn sounds. Not yours. A cry spreads. They're retreating. You don't believe it until you see it. Saxons dropping weapons. Guards scattering. Someone throws a bucket of milk and flees. The gates swing open. Not from your side, but from within. Someone opened them. You'll never know who. London is yours. It's not quiet. There's still fighting in the alleys. Screams, smoke, weeping. But the city is falling into Danish hands, piece by filthy, burning piece. You stumble into the square. Cnut stands atop a mound of crates, cloak torn, blood spattered across his cheek. He looks radiant, triumphant, slightly irritated that someone broke his banner pole. You line up with the other survivors, axes lowered, waiting for recognition. This is your moment, the reward, the glory. Cnut scans the crowd. He says nothing. He turns to the bishop beside him and begins discussing taxation. Bjark blinks. Did we win? Ulfric shrugs. Feels like a win. Smells like one too. Gut sniffs. That's me. Sorry. A clerk comes around handing out tokens of royal favour. They are small metal discs. You think they're coins at first. They are not. They are washers. Leftover pieces from some broken siege equipment. You hold yours up. It's bent. You fought on a flaming bridge, got attacked by bees and clubbed by a nun for this? Historians still argue whether Cnut's Huskarls were properly rewarded for their loyalty. Some suggest they were granted land and titles. Others suspect they got bread crusts and mild applause. You lean toward the latter. But the thing is, despite everything, you did it. You stormed the bridge. You breached the gate. You survived 5 varieties of poultry-based assault. You and your axe brothers stood together through it all. And that counts for something, doesn't it? Your quirky tidbit. After taking London, Cnut reportedly tried to reconcile with its citizens by marrying Queen Emma, Ethelred's widow. A clever political move that united Danish and Saxon claims. Also, possibly, the most awkward honeymoon in history. The fires in the city begin to die down. Rain starts to fall, because of course it does. You sit on the curb of a flooded street, watching the smoke twist into the sky. Bjarke sits beside you, nursing a black eye and eating a raw turnip. So, he says through a mouthful, what now? You shrug. Sleep, maybe. A bath, though it may kill you from shock. You still have that loot. You plan to learn 3 chords and become a bard just out of spite. The war isn't over. Cnut will need men for more battles. For Wales. For the North. For whatever rebellion pops up next. But for now, for this one night, London belongs to you. And you plan to steal something nice before anyone notices. Maybe a goose. One of the aggressive ones. You name it. Glory. The candles burn low in iron sconces, coughing out more smoke than light, as shadows stretch across the cold stone walls of the dormitory. The wind outside whines through arrow slits, a pitiful, eerie sound that sets your teeth on edge. You're 13 winters old, still growing into your armor, and your only real skill so far is sweating through your linen shift whenever the priory bells ring after midnight. This is your life now, a lowly squire in a Templar preceptory. And lately, you've started to hear whispers. Not the usual gossip about who let the mule wander into the sacristy again or which knight has the worst breath. These are stranger rumours. One's passed between bunks in the dark, only when the elder monks have gone silent and even the bravest squires are staring at the ceiling, clutching rosaries like they might actually help. It started 2 weeks ago, when Jerome disappeared. He was a wide-eyed, soft-spoken boy from the provinces. Clean ears, polished boots. The kind who cried when his porridge was cold and still apologized to the training dummy after stabbing it. He vanished after evening prayers. No ceremony, no notice. Just one night, his cot lay empty, and the next morning the monks acted like he'd never existed. His name wasn't called at drills. His chores were quietly reassigned. Even the cook muttered less. That alone chilled you more than anything. They say he was taken. Initiated. The real initiation. Not the public vows and ceremonial sword touching. The other one. The one that happens deep beneath the chapel floor. In the crypts. You're not supposed to know about the crypts. You've never seen them. They're kept behind an oak door, reinforced with black iron bands, right beside the altar, where no one lingers too long. The air near it always smells. Wrong. Not bad, just off. Like earth and something once sweet that turned bitter centuries ago. The older squires, Martin, Alan, and Hugo, have theories. Hugo says the knights use the crypt to test loyalty. A night in the dark with nothing but a candle and the skulls of failed initiates. Martin insists it's a ritual chamber where strange symbols are drawn in ash and the candidates are made to drink something foul and red. Alain? He just smirks and says it's worse than anything you could imagine. He's the one who always speaks last. And somehow, that makes you believe him most. You start writing things down in your diary. You don't tell anyone about the diary. That would be a mistake. Squires who ask too many questions get extra chores. Squires who write them down disappear. Still, you can't help yourself. There's something comforting about writing it all down. Proof that you weren't imagining it when Brother Gerard walked the chapel barefoot at midnight, singing in Latin no one had taught you. Or when you found a ring of salt around your cot one morning and Martin swore it wasn't a joke. The best entries come right after lights out. You curl under your thin wool blanket, scribbling by candle nub when the others are asleep, or pretending to be. One page describes how you heard tapping behind the walls during compline. Another details the mark you found carved into the back of your wooden bowl. A perfect triangle, etched so finely it must have been done with a knife smaller than your little finger. Most chilling are the smudged lines you wrote last night, your hand shaking as you tried to describe the dream. You were in the chapel. Alone. Except it wasn't the chapel. The pews were gone. The windows bricked over. The crucifix had been replaced by something older, faceless and tall. And the knights, hooded, motionless, stood in a perfect circle. You stood with them. Someone handed you a cup. You woke up just before drinking. You didn't sleep after that. Today, you polish chainmail that smells of sweat and old blood, the iron biting into your fingers, no matter how many rags you wrap around your hands. You brush down the stables, though the horses shy away from you more than usual. The kitchen boy won't meet your eyes. You start to feel like the walls are breathing. Historians still argue whether the Templar initiations included any secret rituals at all. Most of what's known comes from trials centuries later, accounts pulled from frightened minds under threat of torture. But none of that matters when you're 13, surrounded by older boys who look at you a little too long and suddenly stop laughing when the sun sets. After evening prayers, Alain slips you a piece of parchment. It's folded neatly, the corners pressed flat like a letter from home. But there's no writing on it. Just a single pressed fingerprint in what looks like wax, though it smells faintly metallic. You try to hand it back. He just walks away. That night, the whispers intensify. You hear a soft chant coming from the chapel through the cracks in the floorboards. You're not even sure if it's Latin. You think about waking Hugo, but he's lying rigid with his eyes open, unmoving. His breathing is too even to be real sleep. You bury your head beneath your blanket. Just before dawn, you find a white scrap of cloth tied around your locker handle. You untie it with trembling fingers. There's no message. There doesn't need to be. You've heard the stories. The cloth is the first sign. Next, they come for you. You wake to silence. Not the usual hush of early morning, when the other squires are still groaning in their beds, but a different kind of quiet. The thick, pressing kind that sits on your chest like a stone. No birdsong. No clatter from the kitchen. Just a slow creak from the hallway, like someone pacing barefoot on old wood. You don't want to check, but you do, because now you're in the hooded ones at midnight, and it's your turn to see what the others swore they saw but could never prove. You slip from your cot, careful not to rustle the straw. The white cloth token they left on your locker is now tucked under your tunic. You don't know what it means, exactly. You just know no one else saw it. Or if they did, they're pretending they didn't. Alan gives you a long glance across the room as you pass. It's not a friendly look. It's not unkind either. It's the kind of look a man gives a candle that's about to go out. The hallway is colder than it should be. The flagstones seem to sweat under your bare feet. You pad past the chapel doors, which are, somehow, ajar. The great hinges don't squeal like they usually do. It's as if the whole place is holding its breath. Inside, the altar glows dimly from candlelight. But it's not the usual 6 candles, 3 on either side. No, this is a circle. 13 flames, perfectly spaced. Each one flickering a little too high for the lack of wind. You step inside, and the door closes gently behind you. You didn't touch it. There's no one in the pews, no monks in the alcoves, just you, and the sound of footsteps. Somewhere below, there's a trapdoor in the corner. You've always known it was there, but today the rug that usually hides it is gone. The latch is unlatched. You could turn back. You don't. The stairs are narrow, winding, and seem to have been carved by a drunken mason with a dull chisel. You descend anyway. The stones slick beneath your hands. The walls grow tighter. The air thickens, turning from incense to something more earthy. Mildew, iron, and wax. You reach the bottom, and that's when you see them. The hooded ones. They're standing in a circle, facing inward. 12 of them, in white mantles with the blood-red cross stitched into each chest. Their faces are hidden. You recognize no one, yet you're certain you're being watched. The air hums with energy, not loud, but deep, like the sound a mountain might make if it had something to say. One of them steps forward. He, or it, extends a hand. You don't take it. Not yet. Instead, your eyes flick toward the center of the circle. There's a stone pedestal, no more than waist height. On it lies a bowl filled with water, or something that reflects your face, but not quite right. Your eyes in the reflection look older, sharper, almost cruel. The hooded one speaks, but not in words. It's more like the sound of a thought echoing directly into your skull. A question. Are you ready? You want to say no. Your knees want to flee, but your mouth answers yes before you understand why. The ritual begins. Not with blood, not with pain, with breath. Each hooded figure inhales at the same time, a long, slow pull that feels like it's dragging the warmth from your lungs. The candles flicker violently, then settle into a new rhythm, like they're breathing too. The voice speaks again. Do you know the names of the 12 before you? You don't. Yet somehow, your lips begin to move. You name them. Names you've never heard. Names that sound like thunder and bone. You say them anyway. You are handed an object, a piece of chalk. You're led to a wall. You draw a symbol, a perfect triangle. Inside it, a circle. Inside the circle, a key. Your hand doesn't tremble, even though your heart is trying to dig through your ribs. This is not a test of strength, like the stories said. Not a room full of swinging axes or venomous frogs. This is worse. This is belief. You are asked to kneel. You do. The circle closes in. A hooded one reaches out and places something cold on your forehead. The stone burns. Not hot, just real. Heavy with meaning. The shape of it lingers in your skin long after it's gone. You're told to rise. You do. The hooded ones step back. One of them lifts their hood. It's Brother Matthew, the man who rarely speaks, the one who eats in silence, the one who never blinks. He nods. "You are one of us now," he says in actual words. That's worse, somehow. The circle disperses. You are led back up the stairs. The door opens for you before you touch it. The dormitory is as you left it. Except now, your cot is made. Your boots are clean. And there's a piece of parchment waiting under your pillow. No writing. Just the same triangle you drew earlier. You slip it into your diary. Historians still argue whether these so-called secret rites ever occurred, or whether the Templars were just victims of wild rumours and political smears. But tonight, deep beneath a silent chapel, you saw something that has no place in polite records or Latin footnotes. And now it's in you. You lie back down, stare at the ceiling. The others pretend to sleep. You pretend too. But you both know the truth. They're coming for Martin next. And you'll be expected to watch. Section 12. You wake long before the chapel bell rings, your heart already thudding as if it knows something you don't. The dormitory is still, but not in the usual sleepy way. It feels emptied out, like the air itself has drawn back in anticipation. You lie there for a moment, unmoving beneath your rough wool blanket, pretending you're still dreaming. But you're not, because something shifted overnight, and you can feel it in your bones. Today, something is going to happen. The cloth token is still tucked under your tunic. It hasn't moved. It hasn't vanished. That makes it real. And that, somehow, makes it worse. You dress slowly. The others pretend to sleep, but they're all doing the same thing. Listening. Every rustle, every breath, every creak of floorboard might mean it's beginning. No one speaks. Not Elaine, not Martin, not even Hugo, who never shuts up. They just lie there like wax statues, eyes flickering shut when your gaze passes them. Outside the dormitory, the priory is unusually quiet. The horses in the stables don't stamp. The dogs aren't barking. Even the wind seems reluctant to disturb whatever's about to unfold. You step into the corridor and glance toward the chapel. The doors are open, just slightly, as if someone forgot to close them. But that never happens. You hesitate only once before walking toward them. The chapel is lit, but not by the usual warm light of morning candles. These flames are smaller, sharper, placed in deliberate positions along the stone walls and pew ends, creating narrow slashes of shadow. There's no priest, no brothers kneeling in prayer. Just that soft light and the faintest smell of tallow and iron. The door to the crypt, normally locked with a heavy iron bar, is open. It's not supposed to be open. You know what you're doing is wrong. You know you should turn back. But your feet are already moving, and your hand is already on the wooden frame as you descend the narrow spiral stairs into the dark below. The air grows cooler. The stones dampen under your fingers. The flickering torchlight barely keeps up with your descent. For the first time since you arrived at the preceptory, the air smells entirely of earth. Not incense, not horse, not sweat or soap, just cold, packed earth and something underneath it you can't name. At the base of the stairs is a small chamber. You've never been here before, but you recognize it immediately. Everyone knows it, because it's where they say the real initiations happen. Not the ceremonies with prayer and robes and anointing oil, but the ones whispered about in beds, the ones older squires hint at with wide eyes and lowered voices. The room isn't empty. 12 men stand in a wide circle around a stone basin. They're Templars. You can see their white mantles, though the hoods are up, obscuring their faces. Each one holds a single candle. They do not look at you. They don't have to. You feel their attention wrap around you like a net. At the center of the chamber, atop a low platform, is a flat stone slab. A bowl rests on it. Ceramic, plain, cracked at the edge. Something dark sits inside. You don't know if it's water or oil or something else. You don't ask. One of the knights steps forward and places something into your hand. It's a key. Small, iron, old. No explanation is given. He steps back into place. You've rehearsed this moment in your head a dozen times. You imagined fire, pain, maybe blood. Some dramatic gesture, a secret phrase in Latin that unlocks divine knowledge. But instead, one of the knights simply speaks. His voice is low and dry, like leaves crushed underfoot. He tells you that this is a rite of endurance, of loyalty, of silence. Not every squire is chosen. Not every squire understands. But if you accept the burden now, you may not lay it down later. The others do not move. They stand like statues. The only sound is your own shallow breath. You nod. That is enough. They begin to chant. Not loud, not even in unison. Just a low ripple of words, in a language you don't recognize. Not Latin, not French. The syllables make your skin crawl in places you didn't know had nerves. One of them lifts your hand and dips your fingers into the bowl. The liquid is cold. When it dries, it leaves behind a strange pattern, like a star within a circle, with a line through it. You've never seen it before. You'll never forget it. No further instructions are given. You are told to return to your bed. No one follows you. You ascend the stairs in silence. The chapel is still empty when you return to it. The dormitory, though, is different. You walk in and everything is just as you left it. Except now, your blanket has been folded. Your boots are perfectly clean. A small linen packet of dried lavender lies on your cot. Someone has left you a single strip of white parchment with a tiny wax seal on it. No crest. Just an imprint of a triangle pressed deep into the wax. No one looks at you. No one speaks to you. But Elaine gives a single sharp nod when your eyes meet. You lie back in your cot, staring up at the ceiling, heart still racing. Historians have long debated whether the Templars engaged in secret rites beyond their well-documented oaths of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Some say the accusations of occult practices were invented by jealous kings and inquisitors. Others point to odd symbols in forgotten ruins and diaries written in cipher by squires like you. If anyone ever finds your diary, they won't understand what happened tonight. Not fully, and you won't tell them. Because you were given the key. And you said yes. The next morning, life resumes with mechanical precision. No one mentions the chapel. No one even hints at the crypt. The morning bell rings, feet hit the floor, and the day grinds on as if nothing happened. You join the others in the courtyard, lining up for sword drills beneath a pale, grumbling sky, your hands still marked with the faint residue of last night's ink-black anointing. You scrubbed hard. It didn't come off. Hugo glances your way and quickly looks down. Martin avoids you entirely. Alain pretends not to notice, but corrects your footwork twice in a way that almost feels respectful. The air is thick with the weight of unspoken understanding. Whatever happened in the chapel is not something anyone talks about in daylight. Not in the mess hall, not in the cloisters, and especially not in the presence of the knights. For the rest of the morning, you pretend nothing has changed. You haul sacks of flour from the cellar and clean the latrines like any other squire. But you notice details more sharply now. The way the Templar brothers murmur to one another behind closed doors, the subtle shift in their posture when you walk past, the brief silence in the refectory when you sit down. You're not one of them, not yet, but you've been marked. Not everyone is. Some squires are overlooked, passed by, or perhaps spared. You're not sure which is worse. After midday prayers, you're sent to the stables, where the horses are agitated. They prance and snort at shadows that aren't there. The oldest gelding refuses to eat. The stable master scolds you, then pauses, studying you with narrowed eyes before waving you off. The animals know. Somehow, they always do. By late afternoon, you've made your way to the far end of the preceptory, where the stone wall behind the stables curves sharply into an overgrown hedge maze. You're not supposed to go near it. That part of the grounds is technically abandoned, or so they claim. Yet the grass is always flattened in a neat trail, and the iron gate never has cobwebs. Curiosity gnaws at you. The parchment from last night still sits folded in your tunic, its triangle seal intact, It vibrates with a sense of unfinished business. You follow the trail, ducking under the archway of vines and brushing aside nettles until the maze opens into a small, sunken courtyard, one that doesn't appear on any of the preceptory's maps. At the far end stands a stone bench and a crumbling wall covered in moss. Set into that wall is a wooden panel, weather-worn and warped, but clearly not original. Someone built it to blend in. Most people wouldn't notice the seams. You kneel and press your ear to the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, something metallic clicks. 3 times in slow succession. Not random. A signal. You reach into your tunic and pull out the small iron key they gave you. It fits the lock perfectly. The panel creaks open, revealing a passage behind it. Narrow, dark, unlit. The stone walls inside are damp and irregular, twisting downward like the throat of some ancient beast. You shouldn't go in. No one told you to, but no one needed to. You were chosen. That's enough. The tunnel stretches longer than expected. You lose track of the turns. The damp seeps into your boots, and the walls seem to pulse slightly with the pressure of earth above. Eventually, you reach a wider chamber lit by a single tallow candle stuck into the skull of some unfortunate animal. Symbols are etched into the walls. Triangles, circles, unfamiliar scripts that look half religious, half mathematical. On a small altar in the center lies a folded piece of parchment and a strip of white cloth. Another token. You approach, expecting a message. There is none. Instead, beneath the cloth is a wooden board covered in letters, seemingly random, but you recognize the pattern. It matches the cipher Martin once bragged about cracking. You run your fingers over the surface and realize it's a test. You're expected to decode it. The solution comes slowly. It's a riddle, or maybe a command. When rearranged, the letters spell out, "You will not speak, but you will hear. You will not see, but you will remember." You place the cloth into your pocket and blow out the candle. The message doesn't make sense, yet. But they wouldn't have shown it to you if it wasn't meant to later. As you make your way back up through the tunnel, you feel different. Not braver, not stronger, but newly fragile. Like you've been cracked and resealed, and now every echo in the hallway seems to hum against the fault line. Back at the preceptory, everything is still in motion. Squadrons of knights return from patrol. A visiting dignitary's cart rattles across the courtyard. Novices chant psalms in the chapel. The world rolls forward unbothered, unaware that its stones have shifted beneath the surface. You return to the dormitory just as the sun begins to fade. Hugo gives you a strange look, and then quickly asks if you want the last of the bread. You decline. You're not hungry. Not really. That night, as you lie in bed, you open your diary and begin to write. You leave out the details. You don't name anyone. You don't describe the passage behind the wall or the symbols carved into its sides. You simply write, "They said I would hear." And then you wait. Sometime after midnight, just as you're drifting into that slippery place between waking and sleep, you hear voices. Not outside, not in the hallway, inside. You can't make out the words. They're too soft, too distant, like monks praying on the other side of a heavy curtain. But they're there. And they're saying something. It repeats. The same phrase over and over, in a language your body seems to understand even if your mind does not. You press your hands to your ears. The sound doesn't stop. You stop writing in your diary. Not entirely. You still jot down the occasional scrap, dates, symbols, half-remembered words that vanish as quickly as they come, but you no longer write the way you did before. There's a heaviness now, a sense that committing things to paper might make them too real, too permanent, too visible to someone who shouldn't see. The whispers have continued every night for a week. They never come from the same place. Sometimes they seem to echo from the rafters above your cot, sometimes from the wall behind the apothecary's shelf, and once, most disturbingly, from the inside of your own chest, vibrating beneath your ribs in time with your breath. You can't decipher them, not yet, but your dreams have begun to borrow their rhythm. You wake each morning with words tangled on your tongue that don't belong to you. The other squires are quieter now. Elaine has stopped meeting your eyes. Martin gives you a wide berth, muttering his prayers a little too loudly whenever you pass. Hugo, usually the boldest, has taken to sleeping with a crucifix clutched so tightly the wood has left a permanent imprint in his palm. Something's changed. They've noticed. Then, during the midday meal, the summons comes. Brother Matthew appears in the mess like smoke, silent and sudden. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. Every wooden spoon freezes, every whisper dies. His eyes settle on you, and the air thickens. He tilts his head toward the door. You stand, legs trembling only slightly, and follow. No one looks at you as you go. You're led out of the preceptory and across the cloister yard toward the north wall. Beyond it lies the old mill, long abandoned, supposedly rotting from flood damage and black mould. You've never been allowed near it before. Now Brother Mathieu produces a ring of keys from beneath his robe and unlocks the gate. Inside, the air is stale and thick with dust. Sunlight filters through broken shutters, slicing the gloom into pale ribbons. The grinding wheel is motionless, covered in lichen, the stone basin beneath it cracked down the middle like a skull. But beneath it all is a staircase, spiraling and narrow, almost invisible in the shadow of the great wheel. You descend again, into yet another underworld. The staircase opens into a rectangular chamber lined with stone benches. A single candle flickers on a small iron stand in the center of the room. This time, there are no hooded knights, no ceremony, no circle. Just Brother Mathieu, and on the stone table beside him, a wooden box bound in blackened iron. He opens it without a word. Inside is a length of red cloth, folded into a perfect square, a dagger with a bone handle, a sealed letter. He asks you a question softly in Latin. Do you renounce the world? You've practiced the response for years. Every squire knows it by heart, even if they never expect to say it. You nod and answer, yes, in body and spirit. He nods once and places the cloth in your hands. It's not silk, not velvet. It's wool, heavy, warm. You are told this is the sign. The red is the blood you will never spill unless commanded. The cloth is the burden you now carry. The dagger is not for battle, it is for silence, if ever necessary. He doesn't explain what that means. He doesn't need to. Next, the letter. You are not to open it, not until you are summoned again. You accept it. You do not ask what it says. Historians have long debated whether young Templar squires were ever entrusted with sealed documents as part of their induction. Some believe these stories are fabrications, twisted memories turned myth. Others claim that each squire held a secret, some burden of knowledge locked away for the day they might be called upon to use it, or die to protect it. Brother Matthew dismisses you with a nod, as though you've merely completed a routine chore. No words of congratulations, no blessing. Just the weight of the cloth, the chill of the blade, the heat of the unread letter burning through your tunic. You return to the dormitory as the sun sinks low behind the walls. Your steps feel slower, heavier, though no one would notice from the outside. The others are waiting for you. None of them say a word, but they part slightly as you approach, leaving a space for you to sit. It's not approval, not fear, it's a shift. You're not one of them anymore. Not exactly. That night, the whispers are louder. They surge just as you begin to drift off, riding the edge of sleep. But this time, they're not chaotic or foreign. This time, you recognize them. It's your own voice, repeated back to you, whispering phrases you wrote in your diary days before, in the dark, in secret. They've been reading your thoughts. You sit bolt upright. Your cot is soaked with sweat. The others are all still, too still. Then you see it. A folded square of parchment tucked beneath your pillow. You unfold it slowly. The message is brief. Tonight. That's all it says. You wait, nerves crawling, for someone to come. No one does. Hours pass. The candle stubs burn low. But just as your eyes begin to close from sheer exhaustion, you hear it. Soft footsteps outside the window. A shadow crosses the stone, not stopping, just passing. That's when you understand. They've already come. The message wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. Tonight, you were seen, judged, measured, and for now, allowed to remain. The days that follow stretch long and quiet. There's no ceremony, no nod of approval, no new privileges or whispered instructions. You continue your daily routine, mucking out the stables, oiling armor, memorizing prayers. But there's a strange shift beneath it all, like the floor beneath the preceptory has tilted slightly without anyone noticing. No one mentions the red cloth, the letter, or the visit to the crypt, yet those who know act just a little differently. Brother Matthew doesn't speak to you again, but he pauses when passing by, as if acknowledging your presence with something heavier than a glance. Alain no longer hovers during drills or corrects your form, and when you clean the training yard after sunset, you often catch him watching from the cloister walkway, arms folded, expression unreadable. You don't open the letter. Not out of fear, exactly, but because it doesn't feel like yours yet. It was given, not explained, and until someone tells you otherwise, you carry it in silence, tucked carefully between two planks beneath your cot. Some nights, you press your fingers to the wood and imagine the parchment still pulsing faintly, as if it knows its words are waiting for the right moment. On the seventh day, a rider arrives. His cloak marked not with the red cross of the Templars, but with a plain, unadorned circle embroidered in grey thread. His horse is lean and mud-slicked, his beard untrimmed, and he carries no sword. The others take notice. Even the knights, usually slow to rise for visitors, come forward. The master of the house meets him directly at the gate, and though they speak quietly, the tone is urgent. Later that evening, the dormitory is silent earlier than usual. Alain, who rarely misses a chance to brag about his day, doesn't say a word during the meal. Hugo, fidgeting as always, starts to whisper something in your ear, but then glances behind you and abruptly leaves the room. You follow a few moments later and find another note waiting under your pillow, folded into a perfect square, pressed flat with purpose. It's written in the same tight, angular script you saw once before. Return to the crypt. Bring the letter. Alone. You expect to be watched as you leave, but no eyes follow you. The others have either been warned or know better than to interfere. You walk across the courtyard without a sound. The stone cool beneath your soles, the sky low and heavy with unseen stars. The chapel doors are unlocked, the interior dark except for the faint flicker of a single taper left burning near the altar. You pass through without hesitation. The trapdoor is open again. The stairs seem longer this time, though you've only walked them twice. The deeper you go, the more the silence presses in. Not peaceful, but dense and still, like you've stepped inside the lungs of something enormous and sleeping. When you reach the chamber, the air is dry and oddly warm. 3 figures wait for you at the far end, seated, faces visible in the candlelight. No hoods, no pageantry. One of them you recognize as the rider from earlier, the man with the plain grey circle stitched into his cloak. Another is Brother Matthew. The third, an older woman in a weathered mantle, doesn't speak or move, but her presence fills the space like she's carried more secrets than anyone here would dare to count. You sit when prompted. The bench is rough stone, worn smooth at the edges by years of similar meetings, or maybe just a few meetings that mattered more than the rest. No one wastes time. The rider nods to you, gestures to the letter you're holding, and asks if you're prepared to open it. His voice is low, calm, but the way he phrases it, "Are you prepared?" sends a prickling sensation down your arms. You nod, though you're not sure what kind of preparation would ever be enough. They don't provide further instruction, just silence. You hold the letter in both hands. The wax seal cracks neatly under the pressure of your thumb, breaking without sound. Inside, the parchment is heavy, slightly yellowed, its ink darker than anything you've seen used in the preceptory scriptorium. The words are few, one sentence followed by a list. A single phrase, written in the same style as the notes you've received before. Observe, do not interfere. Below it, 22 names, each separated by a line. Some you recognize, others you don't. A few are circled in red. 2 are marked with an unfamiliar symbol, like an hourglass or a blade. At the very bottom of the list is your own name, with nothing beside it. No circle, no mark, just the same careful script, as if waiting for someone else to decide what it will become. You look up, unsure of what to say. The older woman finally speaks, her voice dry but sharp, like parchment rustling in a closed book. She tells you the list isn't a command. It's a responsibility. A record. A warning. Those on it are being watched for reasons you are not yet meant to know. Some will rise, some will fall. Some will disappear altogether. Your job is not to protect them or betray them, but simply to remember. The power lies in knowing what others have forgotten. Brother Mathieu adds that the knowledge in the letter is not to be copied, spoken, or passed through writing. If it's lost, it's lost. If it's revealed without cause, the consequence falls on you. He doesn't elaborate on what that means. He doesn't have to. They ask if you understand. You hesitate, not because you doubt the gravity of what's been placed in your hands, but because you're not sure understanding has anything to do with it. You nod again, more slowly this time. They rise as one and walk past you, the rider pausing briefly to place a hand on your shoulder, a gesture of confirmation, not comfort. And then they vanish back into the stairwell. You're left alone in the crypt, the letter now folded again, the ink inside burned into your mind. The candle flickers once more before going out on its own. Back in your cot, beneath the moonlight leaking through the dormitory's narrow window, you don't sleep. You lie awake, eyes fixed on the rafters above, the weight of the names pressing down across your chest. Not heavy, but unrelenting. You understand now that the initiation never truly ends. Only your silence begins. The preceptory sleeps. Somewhere beyond the chapel walls, owls call softly from the edge of the woods. The stone corridors are hushed, lit only by the occasional glow of moonlight slipping through arrow slits and bathing the floor in silver ribbons. You lie still, blanketed in the quiet, aware of each breath as it rises and falls, like the slow rhythm of waves beneath a still boat. Your fingers rest lightly against the folded parchment beneath your pillow, its edges worn smooth from your touch. You don't need to read it again. You've memorized every name, every curve of ink. They live behind your eyes now, flickering through your thoughts like soft embers that never quite die. You know, more than ever, that you aren't just a squire anymore. And yet, you still are. Still expected to rise before dawn, scrub boots, and chant psalms as if nothing has changed. But something has. Deep beneath the rituals and rules, something has shifted. Something secret, silent, and sacred. Outside, the wind brushes the walls like a gentle hand. The wooden beams above groan faintly, not in warning, but in age. Your body begins to settle, muscles loosening, thoughts softening at their edges. Tomorrow will come, and with it, another day of obedience, of questions left unasked, and of watching without being seen. But for now, you are safe. The stone around you, once cold and hard, feels solid, familiar. It holds you gently, like it's known your weight for a long time. The quiet wraps around your shoulders like a woolen cloak. Close your eyes and let yourself drift. No one is coming for you tonight. You're already one of them. Sweet dreams. Wanderer of stories,